Ricciardo is not in a good position right now, and it seems like he's just received a reality check for his future. Although we've been led to believe that he could genuinely replace Perez, that is very unlikely to happen in the upcoming period, and Ricciardo has faced the reality of his career. It's difficult to put yourself in Ricciardo's shoes right now, with the Australian on the verge of retiring after rumors of him replacing Perez at Red Bull. Ricciardo has been on a downward spiral since leaving Red Bull in 2019, but nothing can be compared with the 2 seasons that Ricciardo spent at McLaren, ones in which he was absolutely outperformed by Norris, especially in 2022. Although he was able to obtain his 8th career win with the Woking-based squad, it was very tough to see the Honey Badger struggle to perform like we were used to in his Red Bull days, which is why the team had to complete a buyout and replace him with his younger compatriot Piastri. While many thought that the proper place for him would be in Haas or Williams, he chose to pursue a dream that was barely reachable, such as waiting for a disruption in Red Bull and replacing Perez as the number 2 driver on the grid. Given the fact that Verstappen and Ricciardo are close friends, he wanted to capitalize on the bad relationship between the 2-time world champion and the Mexican driver, and therefore try to secure his seat with Red Bull in the future. This currently appears to be a utopia for Ricciardo, and there are numerous reasons why he needs to assess the reality of his situation and take a more proactive approach to his future. For starters, Ricciardo is no longer the younger version of himself, meaning that it will be very hard to deliver performances like he did with Red Bull from 2014 to 2018. And in these 5 seasons, Ricciardo wasn't really blistering with the Austrian team, as he only had 7 wins for them. From 2016 on, it was evident that a new sheriff was in town, with Verstappen taking the lead from Ricciardo. Now, 5 years after their last race as teammates, Ricciardo hopes that he can be the starting driver in a team that has changed a lot. Not just the team per se, but the whole concept of the cars is different, and we've seen that Ricciardo isn't really the type of guy to adapt to any given car. That is why the former F1 driver Karin Chandok, who is currently working as an analyst for Sky F1, believes that Red Bull will have a hard time evaluating whether Ricciardo is the right fit for Red Bull, given the fact that they will have much more attractive options to replace Perez if they opt out of this solution. When talking about this matter, Karin said, "I'm waiting to see how it plays out because the last time Daniel drove a Red Bull was in 2018, and Formula 1 cars have changed a lot. It's like a different category now. I think Verstappen has changed a lot, given the trajectory he's been on. He's a 25-year-old whose confidence is growing. I think Daniel versus Checo is an interesting fight for the 24 seat. How do they evaluate Daniel? That's what I'm interested to see because, yeah, they can put him in the simulator, but it's not the same as driving the old car. So will they give him a go in test somewhere? That's what I'd like to see, is how do they genuinely evaluate Daniel Ricciardo today? It's a very interesting thing if you think about it, as Ricciardo could see his seat being taken by the exact same guy he got outperformed by at McLaren, which eventually led to him having to satisfy with the reverse driver role at Red Bull. But in Formula 1, everything revolves around business, and as of now, Ricciardo is without one. The Aussie needs to understand that Perez, although threatened from Brazil onward, has probably understood that he will never match Verstappen's pace, and he needs to be grateful for whatever the team provides for him because, hadn't it been for Red Bull, Perez would have likely retired or driven for another, less competitive team. Apart from Chandok, his colleague David Croft also believes that Ricciardo will have a very hard time proving to Red Bull that they need to pick him for the future. What goes in this favor is the fact that Ricciardo will have the simulator in his hands, but that is far from the right thing, and one of the main reasons why Red Bull wouldn't consider him as the proper replacement for Perez is the fact that he is no longer the old version of himself. When talking about this matter, Croft said, "I think that they, Ricciardo and Perez, are 2 very different styles of drivers. They're both capable of winning races, but to me, they win races in very different ways. I hate to say this, I think Daniel's a terrific bloke, but he's not the future for Red Bull, not by any stretch of the imagination, mainly because of age." When Max spoke at the end of the season and talked about potentially stopping at the age of 31, that's a big revelation to me. He's already thinking about the time he stops racing. If he's thinking that, then Red Bull should be thinking it too. Personally, I'd be trying to identify someone else to come in the future. If you think about it, Red Bull has always hired drivers from their youth. The only exception was made for Perez. However, now that they have such young and inspiring talent in AlphaTauri, such as Tsunoda and De Vries, as well as some great talents in F2 in Iwasa and Hauger, it's very unlikely that they'll choose Ricciardo to replace Perez once the opportunity is provided to him. That is, if the opportunity is provided to him in the first place. As we mentioned earlier in this video, it's very likely that Perez understood his role with the team, and now he knows what needs to be done in order for him to be Verstappen's perfect teammate. Although Perez did nothing wrong after Brazil, he was also given a reality check, and we can't wait to see how the next season unfolds for the second seat in Red Bull. One thing is for sure, Perez doesn't feel threatened at all, and he thinks that Ricciardo is a great addition to the team and doesn't represent a threat to his seat at all. When talking about this matter, Perez said, "I'm very relaxed. We live under a lot of pressure all the time. It doesn't change anything from my side. I think it's a great achievement to have a driver like Daniel. He's going to contribute a lot to our team. He's a great guy. He's one of the guys I get on the most with in the paddock. It's great to have Daniel in the team, and from my side, it doesn't change anything." But what seems to be the harshest thing of all is that, according to Coulthard, if Ricciardo fails to impress Red Bull and show them that he is indeed the driver they're looking for, then his career is probably over. This is something that has been discussed ever since Ricciardo announced that he wouldn't take a place in a lower performing team, such as Haas and Williams, but we weren't ready to see the last of the Honey Badger in 2022. Now we've been shown the reality as well as Ricciardo, and when the dust settled down, it was evident that Red Bull will have much better and more attractive choices than Ricciardo once Perez's contract expires, if the team is ready to part ways with Perez. We must not forget that Perez has been Verstappen's best teammate for the past 2 years, and if there is one person who has helped him win the championship the most, it has to be Perez. Nonetheless, Coulthard believes that Ricciardo will have a very hard period ahead of him, and when talking about this matter, he added, "If he can get his mind back to what it was when he was having success, then Daniel has to have an opportunity to come back. If this opportunity doesn't manifest itself, then that's probably his Grand Prix career wrapped up." What has also been highlighted by Coulthard is that Perez can never drop off from this point, now that his seat has been threatened by Red Bull and by other drivers, and he needs to level up his game if he wants to be Red Bull's number 2 driver for the rest of the grid. If he doesn't manage to do this, then he'll retire as the driver with a couple of GP wins, just like Coulthard himself, and that's why the competitiveness level in Red Bull and in the other top dogs, like Ferrari and Mercedes, is always at the highest possible point. With that being said, what do you think about Ricciardo and his future in Formula 1? Do you think that he has what it takes to remain in the top spot as a starting driver? Let us know in the comments below.